right. Hello and welcome back to another episode of NT Movie Reviews coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, on YouTube and all the podcast platforms at NT Movie Reviews, as well as on all the social media platforms, NT Movie Reviews. Today, I am joined by Spokane-based Jared Briley, whose directorial debut, Evergreens, features a treasure trove of local talent. Young Eve and James come of age as they road trip across the Evergreen state in this Washington set love story. As we follow them in their journey, we witness the simplicity of getting to know someone that inevitably leads to the complexity of falling in love with them, all while trying to figure themselves out in a country that seems to be changing by the minute. Meeting some friends along the way, we get a glimpse of the truly transformative power of human connections. Jared, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for filming a movie set in this state that accurately reflects all of the beauty that the state holds from the east side to the west coast, all the while telling a story, a timeless story of young love. How does it feel to have this film in front of fans now and have people finally getting some eyes on it and getting some feedback?
For sure. I mean, surreal. It's still in that phase of like, all right, we made the thing and now it's out and it's to be shared. And it still felt like mine for a long time, and now that it's here at the festival, people get to see it's not really yours anymore, right? It's to be shared and people can take what they want out of the movie. But it's, yeah, I think we'll have to circle back after the festival and kind of once it really sinks in. But I think we're still in that sort of floaty, surreal phase with it.
Sure, sure. No, I had such a blast with the movie. There's a hopeless romantic. So much of it spoke to the moments where you wanted to be a little bit brave and perhaps a bit reckless too, in terms of following someone across the state. I love seeing some stories like this because it really keeps that passion alive. It shows me, okay, there is still something like this happening in the world. There's magic happening out there. We don't see it, we don't feel it every day, but taking the time to watch these characters slowly fall in love, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And Jared, I was curious, did you grow up in the area here? I would just love to know some of your connection just to this region and what stood out about the beauty of the state that you really wanted to showcase in your story as well.
No, for sure. Yeah. So born and raised in Spokane,
Okay.
and started my film career there. I was, production assistant and worked my way up as an assistant director before getting into the directing game. And and yeah, I mean, I think, my parents are outdoorsy people, and my dad took me camping all through the Northwest. And I think I've always been a movie guy. And one thing that was interesting to me was to really lean into what Washington really looks like and kind of the microclimates and topography change. But yeah, it's being a born and raised Northwesterner, you do have an appreciation for the outdoors, and certainly wanted to reflect that in the movie. And yeah, big hobby is snowboarding. Growing up in Spokane, you kind of have those 5 or 6 resorts within a couple hours. So yeah, that was a big pastime growing up. And I still split my time between Spokane and now in Kentucky, where my wife's from,
Okay.
and did a stint in Los Angeles for a couple years, sort of as my assistant directing career was taking off in my early 20s. And then just I had come back to do a TV show called Z Nation as an
Mhm.
assistant director, and was always kind of traveling to these tax incentive states, and was like, man, why am I living in LA? I got to get back to the Northwest where I want to be anyway. And so yeah, it's now a little bit of a different feel because I have a 6-month-old kid and a wife, and so we're in Kentucky, but then my work's here in the Northwest, and so I kind of bounce back and forth. So
I love that. Something I really appreciated, just as far as where you started the story, so many people think of Seattle, they think of Washington, they're thinking of rain, they're thinking of the water, they're thinking of forests maybe. I love that we start the journey in Eastern Washington and we make our way over to Seattle because I think for so many people, they don't really understand what Eastern Washington is really like, from vineyards to all the apple orchards to just beautiful lakes. It looks like the middle of the country. It looks so vast, and it's something I really just appreciated in the storytelling as well, was just how many different types of people from the state. You were kind of able to encompass in telling the story. Obviously, we'll get to Seattle, we'll get to where the water is, but I love spending that time on a portion of the state that I feel like doesn't always get the love that it deserves or the attention
Yeah.
that it deserves.
Yeah, because of course, like when you look at Washington film, it's synonymous with Seattle and Olympic National Park, right? And
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think of like a movie like Spielberg's Always, the Richard Dreyfuss one from the 80s. Like they did a good job of giving a sense of like he lands in the wheat fields at one point, and they do some stuff in Eastern Washington as well as Western. But otherwise, I was like, man, I don't know that that movie really shows what the whole state is. And it became an interesting thing too to really have it driven by the characters, because I really like the idea of the love story, right? And you sort of start in a certain look, and then as the movie progresses and the romance progresses, it sort of becomes a more lush and vibrant environment. So we really wanted to use the state to kind of thematically push that stuff forward.
Sure. No, I think that worked really well. I, for one, love the cast. Darby Lee Stack blew me away in this
Super.
film as ever. It's one of those feelings where sometimes you watch movies and I was like, I've never seen this actress before. Coming out of nowhere, hit me like a train. Her emotional vulnerability, her range of acting, there's cheekiness, there are aspects of younger Gen Z, millennial, whatever it might be. You get some of that in the conversation, but there is still that old soul that obviously Edward's character is certainly tethered to. And I was blown away. There were moments where I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bit of Richard Linklater here. I'm taken back to when I watched Boyhood almost 10 years ago when I had
Sure.
graduated high school, and this feeling of, not everybody talks this way. I certainly kind of talk like this. And I just, sometimes in films it can be hit or miss. So you're like, ah, that kind of read a little cheesy, that read whatever. They were brilliant together. And Darby especially, just every beat of the story she sold so well. And I was just curious to know what that collaborative process kind of looked like. And were there things that she kind of brought to the character that maybe you hadn't had yet?
Absolutely. And as we sort of got into the process, I mean, certainly the most rewarding part of this whole film for me was getting to work with Darby and Edward. Yeah, it's funny with these young coming of age love stories, you're sort of buying a stock hoping one day it blows up big, right? And I look at Darby and Edward as like Apple circa 2005, right? You're like, it's a matter of time till they really pop. And I just felt so fortunate that their first real lead roles were this film. I'm glad that you referenced Linklater, because that was a big information, big kind of part of wanting to make the movie was that sensibility of slice of life that he does, I feel like, better than anybody. And it just feels like real life. And so they really brought a lot in terms of improvisation, in terms of just guiding the characters, making script changes that were more reflective of, what they were trying to tell as, young kids figuring their lives out. And so it's funny, I'd love to do a split and look at the script versus the final product. I bet it's like 70-30 scripted improv, or 60-40, something like that. What I appreciated about the movie is the arc that we get with Eve, right? She starts in a place, and then there's a, kind of a frustration and a misplaced anger, I think, about her situation at home and with her mom. And of course, she doesn't grow all the way up because she still has some misplaced anger with a poor bartender later in the story. But what I really appreciated was she got to show all the colors and really show her range as an actress. And in Edward too, where what starts as kind of a fun-loving guy really develops into a multi-dimensional character by the end of the story. And that's really, they drove that. It was on the page to an extent, but I look at, maybe it's because I live in Kentucky part time now, but like I look at them as like thoroughbreds, and you're not gonna want to put them too much any direction. You really just want to let them run and do their thing, and I felt
Sure.
like we were really able to do that. And two, they had such a confidence with the roles, and that really came across on screen. We leaned into that naturalistic feel, and they really ran with it. And doing the road trip for real and be able to progress in story order, I think was a huge benefit for them. They were really able to grow as friends off screen, and then of course as love interests on screen. And there's a finality to the movie because we really did it in story order.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That I'm a sucker for romance movies. I gotta know, was there something about romance films that's always kind of drawn you, whether it's young love, whether it's people discovering themselves? Was there something about the genre that you were really looking forward to being able to put on screen? And was there something that maybe you felt has sometimes been missing from the genre that you were perhaps looking forward to including in your film or including in your storytelling?
I think, um, particularly with the romance, I love grounded in reality. I real people figuring their lives out and in a relationship, which is I think what everybody's looking for, right? So there's a inherent relatability to the genre, and like a rom-com, I would say, is like a heightened version of that. It's a little more floating and a little more. Um, there's just a lightness to it, and I think grounding it into more of a dramedy territory is the ones that I'm really interested in, like Linklaters Before Sunrise or The Spectacular Now. And it's really about people, first and foremost, in their individual journeys to figure out, themselves. But as I think anybody in a relationship knows, it's like you really figure yourself out when you meet somebody that's kind of your match.
Sure. Or that can challenge you in some
Yeah.
ways too.
Mhm.
Something that I absolutely loved about the film, a road trip from Spokane to Seattle for those who are here, it would take a matter of hours, not days, but that just plays so well into the story and the evolution of these characters and that whole idea of like, I mean, what if we extended the trip one more day? Would it be the worst thing in the world to spend one more afternoon together? And there is that aspect of you're young and is this so crazy to want to have one more day like that? I'm sure you're thinking of what the other person's feeling. And I love, love, love the pit stop that they took in Leavenworth. Leavenworth's got a lot of special ties for me. In general, so I just love seeing it up there and on film. It was beautiful and hilarious watching Eve and James gigging for a night, essentially. As they're making their way across, finding little odd jobs or finding fun different bits of work. James in particular, I think something I loved about him was that he really felt a draw to these people. And there's almost this kind of bittersweet, sad feeling when they leave them. You start to hear people's stories when you travel around. And whatever assumptions you might have about this bartender who works in this little spot or this little car mechanic, when you actually spend time with them and you start to learn a little bit about their lives, that does start to change you. I was curious when you're writing James, how much of yourself did you find was coming out as far as that character and maybe what you were looking to explore at all?
For me, I think the draw of the road trip is sort of the people you meet along the way, right? Like that's what makes it special. For me, being 20, I definitely remember that feeling of what am I figuring out my life? Am I arrested development sort of state? I think that's as much of James as I had. Edward really finessed the role to kind of be a more irreverent, fun kind of energy,
Sure.
but then himself be open to meeting new people, and then show that side of him as well. And I think what I really wanted to come across was there's an inherent relatability to being 20, and I think there's some of you and James, there's some of me, there's some of me and Eve as well. That idea that you don't have to figure everything out was probably what I felt a personal connection to for both of them. It's a long life, and there's a lot of it to go through, and there's ups and downs. It's about the experience and putting yourself out there and getting on the road in the literal sense for this film. But I think that was probably the big thing that probably weaved its way into the characters that was part of me.
I love that. And I love Manuel. He's such a great addition to the film. There's a lightness that he brings just with his soul and this kindness that he offers the characters that really stands out. He has this true soul of an artist, and it was beautiful to kind of watch how he lived his days and the impact that he was able to have on James in such a short amount of time. There's mentorship, and then there's something I think beyond that that kind of connected them. I was curious to know if there is a mentor in your life who helped kind of guide you in an unexpected way, whether as a person or as a filmmaker.
I think that's really what they are, right? Is Kathy and Manuel. They're kind of an amalgamation, I think, of a few different people in my life, and whether it's in the industry and as an assistant director, filmmakers I'd worked with that I very much admired, um, and then in just in my personal life, people that the thing about Manuel that I hoped had come across, and Pepe Serna, the great actor who played him, who's just a wonderful character actor who's been around. He's in Scarface, and is an artist himself. So it was already there on the page, but when we offered him the part, it was like such an obvious fit. He kind of is Manuel, and it really was a combination of a few people. But I think that's part of being 20, right? And as you get older, you start to look back and see these moments in your life where, oh, this person was, so kind or so sweet to me. And you don't even know it at the time. And then as you get older and kind of have more of a reflective appreciation, um, you sort of weave that into the story.
I was talking with a filmmaker earlier, and just the whole process of It Takes a Village. There's no way that the movie doesn't get done without so many people, and I'm just curious to know, approaching your first feature film, were there hesitations that you had going into it, and when you came out the other side, what did your support group look like through this film?
It's funny, like as we're talking, and you think about it as a writer and director, and it was a ton of work. But I look at the movie so much more as like a producerial feat, the producing team,
Sure.
and what we were able to accomplish in 18 shooting days across the whole state, and to do it kind of old school and no green screen and all practical locations. And
Which we
uh,
love.
no, and that was a big part of it too, is just leaning into that. But I think the kind of the secret weapon of the movie was I had this kind of 15-year directing assistant directing career working with a lot of great filmmakers. And so when it came time to make my feature, it was, my closest friends and collaborators that I'd worked with for the past 15 years. It had an energy of like, hey, we're just making a friend's movie, but it was a bunch of film professionals. And so really it was our producing team, like Mary Russell, who's here with me, hiding in the corner. She, you
Hi,
know,
Mary.
has had a long, great career, and Mark Dahlstrom, who I started my career with, and Rich Cowan, my wife Ashley Briley, and Casey and Kylie Cowan were the producing team, and they all have an immense amount of experience. And this was like the lowest budget thing that they had done, and it was as a favor to me, but also a project that they were really passionate about. And it was like they're all producers, but they're all working below the line positions, right? They're coordinating the movie, they're finding the locations, they're locking them, they're doing the accounting. So it was a real cool thing to make it with who are my best friends in the industry, and it had that kind of familial quality in making it. You get one chance to sort of make the first feature, and you just get really lucky surrounding yourself with the best people. As I look back on the movie, I'll always be most proud of what we were able to accomplish on obviously a limited budget and schedule.
Oh, absolutely. Something that you play with in the film so well is nervous energy. And nervous is not a bad thing. It could be anxiousness, it could be the butterflies before you kiss someone for the first time, the nervousness and excitement of your daughter getting to go experience something that is rare and that is real in life. I love the moment where Darby calls her by she says, I'm feeling it's magical. I can't describe what I'm feeling. And it is so true in some ways that, there are no words for experiences like these and connections kind of like that. And so that nervousness of sharing kindness sometimes too is not always reciprocated. I'm just curious what nervousness you maybe had as far as approaching sharing this film with the world, and how does it know that it is already resonating deeply with some audiences and connecting in a really human way.
It felt like a long time coming, getting to make the movie. I tried to make some other things, and maybe they were too big or too ambitious for a first feature. And so Evergreens was so much about just circling back to something intimate that I knew I could accomplish on my own terms with my team, and not sort of be at the mercy of a studio or a financier that was like, hey, look, you have to do XYZ. Like, I had this creative autonomy that was super freeing, but at the same time, it was daunting and scary. I think I've just gotten to a point in my career where it's like, man, who cares? Like, I just gotta make the movie I want to make and let the chips fall where they may. And that was kind of the mantra that pushed me through making it. To be honest, you still are nervous about it, and you're still just hoping it resonates, and we find a way to get it out to a wider audience. And for any young filmmaker, it's just the hardest part of it, right? It's just hard to put yourself out there. And I think when you do, it's like a weight off your chest a little bit, but it's like relationships and what the movie's about, where even if you take the risk, it's still a little scary, and you still got to go through the process. And so it's just something you kind of battle like anything in life. You just, you know, I think you just got to be happy you took the swing. Is, I think, what the hindsight is for me.
Absolutely. You didn't get caught staring, I'll tell you that. Is there confidence coming out of this film that you kind of have now moving forward in the sense of like, okay, I got my feature under my belt. I'm ready to do this again. Is there a feeling that I know you're in the moment now of getting ready to share this film with people, and I know you're kind of on the back end of that process, but coming out of it, is there a little bit more confidence or a feeling you have of like, okay, no, this is what I want to be doing, and I'm excited to be able to continue to do this.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is a confidence for sure, but also at the same time, I look at it was just a great learning opportunity. And to do the feature, I come from a production background and being on film sets, but getting to do post all the way through, there's I think about all the things I'd like to do different with the movie, and all those sort of little things, that, oh, I wish I had more time on this, or I focused on this a little bit more. But all that all comes out in the wash, right?
Sure.
You ultimately take it as the experience that it is. And yeah, it does galvanize you a little bit to get it out there. And now it's like, yeah, I can't wait to figure out what the next thing is. It's you just kind of have a stack of scripts that you hope people will be excited about after this one. And it definitely, what I appreciate about it is it really leans into hopefully who I am as a filmmaker. And it's a good example of the type of stories I want to tell, which is real stories about real people. And again, just really about a time in people's lives that's infinitely relatable. Whether you're 80 years old or you're 20 and you're in it right now trying to figure your life out. There's kind of a timeless quality that all the movies I do hopefully will reflect.
I love that. I've just got one last question for you. One of the things that I really enjoyed most about their adventure across the states is, neither of them are 21. And sometimes there's so much of a focus on like, oh, you got to be going out to a club, you got to go to a bar, you got to be doing things that the young kids are doing. And in an age, obviously, where people are consumed by technology, it's so refreshing to see people grow a connection just naturally. Just the two of them to be able to fall into certain experiences, whether they end up drinking in the film or not. I just love that it showcases like, yeah, you don't need anything more than a conversation to really make something life changing. And so I'm curious though, if speaking on Linklater, if we're looking at some point in the future, let's say even James, whether it's just for a week going back across the state, there's a lot of beautiful wineries, breweries, distilleries, ski resorts. Is there anywhere that maybe in the future you're like, I could see them popping over there for some fun, or maybe another location that you love?
What a great question. It's yeah, circling back, man. It's funny because Highway 2, right, becomes kind of what drove the locations for us. And
Mhm.
y- a true Washingtonian's like, why aren't they on I-90, right?
Yeah,
But that's not very cinematic, and you miss
sure,
Leavenworth and all that. But
sure.
getting away from the literal road, like I would have loved to have been down in Walla Walla in wine country for sure. That's a great area. North Cascades,
Mm.
definitely, some of those lakes up there, Diablo, uh, I, Lake Crescent I always love, but uh, North Cascades, it has a real great look. And then also one of my favorite Washington movies that people forget about is the Jack Nicholson movie, Five Easy Pieces from the 70s. And that's
Okay.
on Orcas Island, I think, in the San Juan
Okay.
Islands. And so I think San Juan Islands would be a lot of fun. I think that that's just a beautiful area, and maybe get some kayaking with even James
Yeah.
with the orcas.
Well, I love that. And again, it's so many people I've already talked to who've seen this film. From the get-go. It's like, thank God this was actually shot here. You did such a beautiful job of showcasing the state, of showcasing young love. Evergreens is playing out the Seattle International Film Festival. I will be championing this film as a fan of Washington film, as a fan of love and movies. I just really, really appreciate this first effort from you, Jared. I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon as well, or this morning, whatever time it is.
No, I love it. Really appreciate it, Nick. No, it was a lot of fun, and feel the love and the love for Washington, and that's what we're hoping for. So again, really appreciate it.
Well, expect more of that. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jared. You have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.